The temporary foreign worker program is in the news again. You remember the story, a couple of waitresses from Saskatchewan, long-time waitresses at a restaurant, claimed they were fired and replaced by foreigners brought into Canada under this program to work for less money. The restaurant denies it, but the waitresses were so adamant in their claims, and the press storm was so overwhelming that it led Jason Kenney, the Minister of Jobs, who also used to be the Minister of Immigration, to immediately freeze the program for all restaurants. We had a great report on this last week from Lisa Mrazek. I mean, that's what low-wage immigration does, right? It undercuts low-skilled workers by increasing the supply of cheap labor. It also makes things tough for low-income Canadians another way by driving up the price of housing. You bring in 100,000 people who bring down wages and push up rent. It's a pickle for poor people, and employers love it. That's why rich American corporations love illegal immigration to the U.S. But I see the other side of the story, too. I'm from the West. There are tens of thousands of jobs that are just going unfilled. It was even worse a few years ago, right before the Great Recession. I remember driving down Highway 2 in Alberta from Edmonton to Calgary, trying to stop somewhere for a bite, and drive-through after drive-through had a sign in their window saying they were shut down because they couldn't hire anybody. No one was willing to work at a Tim Hortons or a 7-Eleven for just 12, 13, 14 bucks an hour. Now, economists would say that's fine if those services were important to consumers, like highway drivers like me who wanted a snack. Well, we should be willing to pay more for our snacks so the restaurants can pay more for their staff. That's how free market economics is supposed to work, supply and demand. Now, bringing in cheaper foreigners is kind of cheating. It's distorting the market, as economists would say, but still, while we're all debating economic theory and being purists, the facts remain. Tens of thousands of jobs are just plain old going unfilled. Remember what Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall said?
There's 15,000 jobs today on saskjobs.ca. Had seen it in letters where companies will say pretty clearly, without temporary foreign workers, we can't keep our doors open. And what does that do to the rest of their staff if they were unable to operate?
Well, I've got a solution. It's what I mentioned to Lisa last week on our show. I happen to know where tens of thousands of bright, young, loyal Canadian citizens are between the ages of 18 and 22, just perfect candidates for so many entry-level jobs. And the answer is they're in the subsidized adult daycare centers that we usually call by a different name. University, yeah, I said it. For many Canadian students, I'm going to go so far as to say half of them, university isn't really about learning, certainly not about learning something practical and useful. Sure, for some folks, they really do learn something, engineering, medical school, that sort of thing. But what about the huge swath of academia that is just plain being invented in the past generation by professors looking to create little empires for themselves and university administrators looking to expand their customer base? I mean, seriously, how many sociology majors and psychology majors and critical studies majors and communication studies majors and women's studies majors does one country need? Now, I'm all for bettering yourself, but this is just welfare for rich kids. Yeah, I said it. Universities, for all the praise we heap on them, are a rich man's world. Sure, there are some kids who move up the ladder through university. That's the archetype we all love, but it's not the reality in the main. Odds are, if you're at a university, you're already from a well-to-do family. It's not necessarily part of your social mobility moving up. And that's what makes the massive government subsidy to universities so bloody unfair. Why should Joe Lunchbucket, working for 20 bucks an hour on the assembly line, pay taxes so that his boss's kid has a cheap university education in Latin American poetry? It's a subsidy to the rich, just like arts funding to the ballet or symphony is. It's the middle class paying for the stuff that snobs can afford on their own. That's my first point. And you can see how it relates to temporary foreign workers. I mean, we are pouring billions of dollars a year into taking young workers out of the workforce to study fake fields of study. We're subsidizing them to be idle. It's a welfare trap, really. We are paying them not to work and not to do anything useful. Why would a young, snobby Canadian student, age 20, lower themselves to work in construction or retail for 10 or 12 or 15 bucks an hour when they could hang out and party each week with a bunch of fun, hip other kids? I mean, it's like a 4-year summer camp. Most of these kids wouldn't pay the full freight of a sociology degree if they had to. It wouldn't be worth it to them or their parents. It's really just a new form of daycare for failure to launch 18 to 22-year-olds. In fact, the average undergrad in Canada takes 5 years to do a 4-year program. Of course. I mean, who would rather work than party for another year? That's why we have to import foreign workers, because our government is paying young, upper middle class kids not to work and not to study anything economically useful, by the way. Math, science, physics, computer engineering, architecture, go for it. But most kids don't. They go to softer studies, which 50 years ago we called hobbies. And here's my best argument. Even if you aren't offended by the working class subsidizing the rich kids, even if you aren't worried about extending childhood well into our kids' late 20s, even if you aren't disgusted by what passes for academics these days, here's the point. Our students are stupider than ever. According to a massive study of 166,000 students in 24 countries, Canadians are decidedly behind. Not just super developed countries like Japan, Norway, Sweden, Australia. We're behind poor countries too, countries that are still catching up from being released from the debilitation of the Cold War's Soviet bloc. I mean, our kids do worse in school than in economic recovery zones like Estonia or the Slovak Republic. I mean, let me tell you exactly what I mean. According to this Skills Outlook survey published by the OECD, 27% of Canadian university students don't even have basic literacy skills. You heard me, kids that in the past would have been kept out of high school are now being warehoused and graduated from our universities. That's literacy, the ability to read and write. It's worse for numeracy, basic math like counting change or balancing your checkbook. 31% of university grads in Canada don't have those basic skills either. Of course not. But they can tell you the feminist critique of Stephen Harper's robocall scandal, and they can tell you why George W. Bush is a war criminal, and they can tell you the political importance of Madonna's music videos. These are things they study these days. That's universities, that's the academics these days. You want to solve the labor problem in Canada? You want to fill those unfilled jobs? I'm not saying shut down the junk schools and their junk departments. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying stop subsidizing that crap. Take away the free money for rich kids. Pretty soon they'll go and get real jobs, or their overweening parents can find them other daycare options that the rest of us don't have to pay for.